What's going on, y'all? It's Anastasia here with another episode of TMC Talk. We are here at Warm Studios in Austin, Texas with the founder of Warm Audio, Bryce Young. So last night we actually had a wonderful holiday jam. What time did you guys go to sleep? At like 4 or 5?
Probably about 6, just because I had to stay up and get my son out of bed for school. But
Aww.
yeah, a lot of cleanup to do after the hang, but it was a lot of fun.
How is that work-life balance? How do you?
In general, it's pretty good. We're blessed to be able to have a lot of good employees, and so at the end of the day, I try to get out of here at least before 6 p.m. is kind of our thing, and then spend time with the kids and help my son with his homework and stuff like that. We have a daughter too. She's a little more self-sufficient, but yeah.
I'm sure it was a lot harder when they were younger.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Did Aubrey more so take over the role of mommy during that time, or was she at the studio as well? You guys would switch out?
No, when the kids were younger, she definitely was more focused on them,
yeah.
Just because they needed her attention and everything. And then I was, when I started Warm, I had a full-time job, and so I was doing a full-time job and doing this on the side and trying to juggle both, and very, very little kids, so it was a lot of work at first.
I actually want to talk about you before Warm. So can you talk about your upbringing? How did those people that were around you influence the business person that you are today?
It's an interesting question. I would say in general, I wasn't really around business owners, and I wasn't in a family of entrepreneurs or anything.
Yeah.
And so it probably was when I moved to Texas, actually. I became friends with people that ran their own businesses and saw, worked at some companies that were startup type companies. I was really impressed with just that autonomy and freedom that comes with owning your own company. And I just wanted to do it. My mom tells me that when I was a really little kid, I always talked about wanting to own my own business, but I don't remember that. So it was something that I've had the desire to do, I'd say, since I graduated high school. But it was seeing people around me do it. I'm like, it's doable. Let's do it,
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Definitely a lot of time management, trust, building up that staff. I seen a quote, actually, that said, your first 100K comes from skill, and your first $1 million comes from building systems. So how would you describe the process of, realizing that you need more than just you on your team?
Yeah, that's tough too. And I'd say every entrepreneur goes through that period where they have full control. That's why you go into running a business, right? Because you're like, I'm not necessarily control, but you're like, I'm in charge. I get to make the decisions. It's my thing. It's my baby. And then all of a sudden, you realize you just can't do it all.
Yeah.
And so you have to hire people, and you struggle with, but I don't trust anybody but myself to do it like I do it.
Yeah.
And so you have to learn that no one's going to do it like you do it, and that's okay. Sometimes they'll do it better. But it's finally when you learn that and you just say, you know what? They're not going to do it like I do it. They might do it better. They might do it a little worse, but I just can't do it all.
Yeah.
And then you can start to grow. But until you do that, you're just stuck. You're never going to grow.
What's kind of your best piece of business advice that you can give to somebody in this industry?
Man, you mentioned time management.
Yeah.
That's really important. Learning when something is taking too much of your time. So you're in the middle of a day and you're like, whoa, I just put 4 hours into this thing that's really not that important. Man, I need to give that to someone else or move on. I'd say that's probably it. Time management. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. How has Aubrey's role in your life, affected the business and, your personal growth?
Aubrey's been really helpful in pushing me. She comes from a family where her dad is a very, very hard worker. And, she knows what's possible and what you can achieve and attain. And I'd say that some people are just sort of like, hey, with a career, with a job, let me find something that works, that gets me there.
Yeah.
She's always had the attitude of, we can do more. You can get to the next level. And so she's been really instrumental in pushing me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's clap it up for Aubrey. What can we look forward to in 2025 with Warm?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're trying to figure that out too. It's funny. We're doing this podcast, and then I told you I had a meeting coming up. The meeting is to talk about what we're doing in 2025
okay.
and the products that we're releasing. We're trying to decide as a company, do we keep doing more of what we've already done, or do we kind of take a pivot and do some different type things? We hired on a really talented engineer about a year and a half ago. He was the chief hardware engineer at Apogee for 25 years.
Oh, nice.
And the only hardware engineer there. He designed everything they made, from the Duet that was super popular in the early 2000s through all the symphonies and all that. So he works for us, very brilliant. And then he just hired on a second engineer. And so we're like, okay, we have all this capability now. In the past, we were outsourcing engineers. We were a little more limited on what we could do. Recreations were a little more simple. But actually, these products are a perfect example. When I said I wanted to do a refresh of our 1176 style compressors, he was like, hey, let's add some features. Let's do something new.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's why I hired you. You can do all that, right? So he came up with these ideas to add like the mix, wet, dry knob, this sidechain high pass filter and all that stuff. And anyways, so the future, to answer your question, more of some of the same, but we're trying to figure out, like, can we do something different?
Yeah. And speaking of this new gear, I think it's very innovative to have like the wet dry knobs and then also the bypass feature, especially for people like who aren't exactly ear trained, just to hear like what they're doing, before and after. So I think that's pretty cool that you guys added that on the 76s.
I agree. I was really proud of him because I remember when we talked about it, and I was very busy at the time, and I said, hey, we're going to re-release these with new features, come up with some ideas.
Yeah.
And so he came up with most of these ideas.
Do you still play a role in like creating the hardware?
Yeah, so I would consider myself a product development manager. So I don't,
Okay.
I have a tiny bit of engineering capability, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And so I like coming up with the ideas, the look, and we have a great graphics guy that helps with the look. But I can look at something and say, that doesn't look right, or that's not going to sell at that price with those features. So I'd say that's probably my main role still at the company. I mean, I do other things like financial things and stuff like that, but I really care about the products. At the end of the day, what do, right? We create products, people buy them. Like, you can't forget that. Cool, we own a studio, we do cool videos, we do all this fun stuff, but really at the end of the day, we make stuff, people buy it. So I always am focusing on what is that thing, the next thing we're making.
What's your favorite piece of gear?
Oh, man. I don't want to give the cheesy answer of all of it, but I am really proud of a lot of the products we've come out with, and I think they're built really well. And so if I had to pick one, man, that's tough looking around the room. I'm a big outboard person, and I love preamps, mainly because when I first got into building gear, it was because I plugged in my low-cost microphones into a high-end preamp, and I said, whoa, this made a big difference. Like, oh, this is why people talk about preamps. It's sort of funny how a lot of starting or newer engineers have to discover that. They're like, oh, I have an interface that has preamps on it. Like, cool, I'm good to go. I don't need preamps. And then one day you use a real preamp, and you're kind of blown away. So I'm probably captivated by the outboard pre's we make. Those are what, where my heart is, I would say. And the 73 series that we have back here, I just think are built so well. I've had guys compare them to vintage 1073s, and they're like, dude, like in blind shootouts, yours win. They tie. So I'm just very proud of those, and they've been one of our best sellers too.
Nice. Yeah, when we first started our studio, our first piece of gear was actually the 1073 emulation. Yeah. And once we put that in the single chain, it like blew our mind because it was such a big difference to go from just having, the microphone to actually having something that, will uplift, the sound and the EQ knobs. I love like just turning knobs.
Yeah.
Like I think that's just like every engineer's like just the sound and like the feel of it. It's uncomparable to digital, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And there's just, I don't know, there's something that when you hear it, it's funny. Some people's ears can't hear that,
Yeah.
which is like, what? But especially when you stack, right? Like, I mean, I hear a big difference just if you were to plug two of the same mic one into a great pre, one into an interface pre, I would hear the difference. But as you start to layer, as you start to build the mix, it becomes really apparent.
What would you suggest for rap vocals? What would be your chain?
You know, it's interesting because for the longest time, people thought rap and R&B, you wanted just super, super clean.
Yeah.
And a song that I think of is Jamie Foxx when he came out with the song, I think like 2010. Blame it on the whatever it was. But yeah. Like I remember hearing that and going, man, this is clean, but it kind of sounds too clean. And I feel like a lot of rap and R&B is starting to kind of trend back to they want it to sound like Dr. Dre and Snoop, and they want to have more color. They want to have analog tone. So, you know, a 1073 style mic pre, if you use a bright mic like a Sony C800 or, you know, we make our WA8000, those two together is a really good combination because you get the brightness of this mic and then it's smoothed over with this, you know, Neve style mic pre. So that would probably be my recommendation because I love color and tone, and I wouldn't want somebody to just have super clean tone.
Yeah. Would you do like a 1B after that and maybe a 76 or?
Definitely the 1B. That's considered sort of the chain, right? It's a 1073. I'm sorry, you know, C800 to a 1073 to a 1B, or in warm audio, ours is the WA8000 to the WA73, and then to the WA1B.
Okay. Can you talk about a little bit more about, you know, how you guys sound treated these rooms?
Yeah, there was a lot that went into the studio, and I'm glad that I hired a guy named Alex Otto to do it, and it was by chance. So when we were designing this building, I was like, oh, I know a lot of people that own home studios, and they've just kind of built, you know, wall within, you know, they built multiple walls with air gaps and extra, you know, layers and all this stuff. I honestly thought that I could sort of design studio. I'm like, yeah, like I could make it work. And I was visiting a school called Crass, which is a recording school in Arizona. And I was there, and the teacher said, I know a guy that designs studios, and I heard you're going to build one. Let me have this guy come visit. And he came to the school that day and looked at my building plans, and he was like, hey, even if you don't hire me, don't build this the way you're going to build it. And so I look at that like as a huge blessing, because I might have just been like, I don't know, just moved forward with it thinking I got extra thick walls, everything's going to work right. He looked at it and said, this just isn't going to work. And so, you know, he taught me a lot about how, you know, sound, we know this, but it travels through vibrations, and you just wouldn't think that, I don't know, everything has to be decoupled. So like even this floor that we're standing on, it's a concrete floor. Well, it's wood, but wood on concrete. And the concrete is poured on rubber. And each room is, the concrete's poured on its own rubber, you know, rubber isolation layer. And not only that, you've got, you know, this wall of that, you know, the front of this room to the wall in the live room. Those are completely decoupled, and they're not touching in any way, and all this stuff matters. So I'm glad we did it right, because I'm glad it works. You can sit in here, you can close all the doors, you can have a drummer right on the other side of the glass, and you don't hear anything. And like, it's just built really well. I've been in other studios, especially here in town, that were designed and look really cool, but like you can hear a lot of stuff through the wall. So I'm glad this guy knew what he was doing, and he's become a really good friend because he had to come out a lot to oversee things. He wired up this, you know, whole console and patch bay and everything. But yeah, it was.
I think Lori was saying that each room has its own foundation. Or
yeah, that's it. Yeah, the concrete. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, think about it too. Like, we've got 18-wheelers dropping off equipment. We've got forklifts in the warehouse. Like, if those were to be on the same concrete, you'd be getting some of that coming through. You'd hear like, what's that? You know?
I think what's really cool about this room in particular is that you can stand anywhere, almost anywhere, and it sounds the same.
I know.
And that's very rare.
It's super rare. And even the guy that designed it, Alex, is like, dude, this room is like better than I thought it would.
He's like, I did my thing with this one.
Yeah. I mean, he did some really interesting things. So like behind that wall, the back wall, it's like a 6-foot deep wall, just filled with insulation and air gaps and things. And I guess the back wall having all that padding is really important. Another thing that makes a room sound really good is flush mounted speakers. So in the walls, he says that takes care of, in his words, 80% of your frequency issues is having the speakers flush mount. Now we also have some speakers that are floating here, but those are equalized and there's some special things done to them. But yeah, I've been in studios too where they'll flush mount speakers and not do it right. And like, it's almost like it's a hollow cavity behind the speaker and you can hear kind of like audio and vibrations in the wall. And it's like I've been in studios where I'm like, let's listen to the big ones. And then they don't sound that good because they're not properly flush mounted. So I got really lucky, honestly. I didn't like call around and talk to 5 different acousticians and like pick the best one. It was the guy that showed up the day I was in Arizona at Crass. I got very lucky.
I've been trying to like teach myself a little bit of acoustics, and I just get a headache every time. Like it's so much like that goes into just balancing the frequencies, making sure that everything sounds sonically okay.
Yeah, it's tough. So we cheated a little bit. We are using a turn-off system in this room, and that but still, even with that system, like you said, every place in the room shouldn't sound good. So that has to do with the engineering of the room. It's pretty awesome. Alex realized how good the room sounded. He's like, you need to get a producer chair that sits in the far back of the room in the center. Where somebody can just sit back there. He's like, because normally when you sit in the back of the room, it just sounds like
all the
muddy
bass accumulates. Yeah.
And he's like, but not here. So you need to, so we still to this day don't have a producer chair. It's a plant, but we need to get that.
I didn't. Do you guys have a sub in here? I didn't.
So we do have a couple subwoofers. They're underneath the flush mounted ATCs in the wall.
Interesting.
And the crossovers are set with the ATCs, and they're time aligned and everything. So like you don't really hear. It doesn't sound like, oh, I hear the subs. It just sounds like, oh, it sounds really good and deep and full spectrum.
Well, Keith wants to know, do you guys plan on making any speakers or interfaces?
We definitely talked about it. We've talked about every type of product, I think, that we could release. I have interest to do it all. I want to do stuff for the market that provides value, though. Like if we come out with an interface that's just like everybody else's interface, feature set wise, even if it sounds really good, there's a lot of good sounding interfaces on the market. So we've talked about ways to do something different, that when you look at it, you go, okay, that's different. I haven't seen that before. So that would be my goal if we do it. Admittedly, it's not on the docket for 2025. We're not going to be releasing an interface next year. But it's a conversation we constantly have. With speakers, I love speakers. I'm fascinated how they all sound a little different. We use ATCs here. ATCs are more of a mid-range sound. PMCs are more scooped. A lot of the different brands just sound a different way. And you can't always say one is better than the other. It becomes preference. And so speakers are interesting where you're almost making a preferential statement. Like, this is what we prefer, what we think sounds best. Yeah. So I have interest in it. It's also not coming in 2025, but it's a conversation. So
if you had to guess which would come first, speakers or interface?
If I had to guess which would come first, speakers or interface, I think we'd probably that's a tough one. Because like I said, we've got some really good engineers now that could do both. But I think speakers would probably come first if I had to guess.
We were arguing at like 6 in the morning the other night. I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. They would do an interface. He said, no, they're going to do speakers. I can just see it. I can tell.
Cool. So where can the people find you?
Obviously our website, warmaudio.com, where we just launched a new website. We're trying to put more sound samples out there and more tutorials and things like that. So yeah, check us out if you haven't checked us out before. Love to have you be part of the family.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode.